Which companies have been added, and how significant is this list?
Well, two of the most prominent names on these additional companies that have been added to this list include China National Offshore Oil Corporation, or CNOOC, and SMIC. Now, CNOOC is the third largest oil and gas player here in China. It has partnerships, by the way, and does business with the likes of ExxonMobil and other oil majors around the world. So that CNOOC is on the list, as is SMIC, as I said, which is what meant to be one of China's biggest hopes to develop its own semiconductor industry to become less reliant on US chips. So CNOOC and SMIC are on the list, as are a couple of companies that are involved in the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, this builds on an initial 31 that were on this list published by the Pentagon. Now, what the US says is that these companies have links to the People's Liberation Army, China's military, China's security apparatus. Other names that were previously on that older list include Huawei and Hikvision. They remain on that list. So there's a total of 35 companies now linked to this list, or on this list, published by the Pentagon, that they say have links to the PLA here. As you say, what it does is likely put more focus on these companies by officials and lawmakers in the United States, and potentially exposes them to sanctions as well.
So in the meantime, though, this is quite bizarre. Wall Street money keeps pushing into China despite the higher risk.
Wall Street money, foreign capital, a record $212 billion this year in terms of increased exposure to Chinese bonds and equity. So there is huge appetite here. You talked about Wall Street. You have the likes of Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and others who are aggressively adding headcount here in China, particularly in Shanghai, by the way, expanding their operations, expanding their ownership, pushing to get majority control of their businesses. You also have asset managers, fund managers, the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard, but also insurance companies like Allianz, which of course is a European firm. All of these financial institutions are adding their exposure to China, simply because the profits are so significant. By one estimate, just in the investment banking sector, you're looking at potential profits of $47 billion just by 2026. And China's regulators, by the way, are helping on this front. We heard Guo Shuqing, who's the head of the banking regulator here, saying that he wants to see further moves to open up the capital markets here. He says an important and a strong financial system is important for a powerful nation. And that is something that lawmakers in Washington are obviously paying attention to. We've seen this flurry of actions on a number of fronts, whether it's human rights or technology or geopolitics or trade, where the US, DC, on a bipartisan effort, have pushed back on China. That is expected to continue. The kind of comments that we heard from Guo Shuqing add to that concern, because they think that they're using US capital to shore up the US economy, to challenge the Chinese economy, to challenge the US. Now, there's not an expectation that things are going to radically change under Biden, but nonetheless, HSBC did a survey of global institutional investors. Two-thirds of them say they expect to increase their exposure to China and to Chinese markets by about 25% in the next year.